Picture this. You land at Piarco International Airport and someone greets you with, "You good? Where you coming from?" And just like that, you're hit with it. That unmistakable sound. Part song, part rhythm, part attitude. To some, it sounds like sing-song English dipped in curry and fried in steel pan oil. To others, it's confusing and musical all at once. But whatever your opinion, there's one thing we can agree on. The Trinidadian accent is unforgettable. Today, we're diving into where it came from. A spicy mix of history, language, pain, survival, and Irish people? Yup, strap in. But before we get into all that linguistic seasoning, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us your favorite Trini phrase or slang. Whether you're from San Juan or San Fernando, or just vibing from afar, we want to hear from you. Now back to the story. Trinidad and Tobago is what you get when the world decides to throw everything into one pot. Africans, Indians, Europeans, Chinese, Syrians, indigenous tribes. If cultures were ingredients, this place is the ultimate Sunday lunch. And just like a good callaloo, the accent that came out of this pot isn't from any one thing. It's from everything. Let's rewind. Way back, before colonizers were even a thought. The first people in Trinidad were the Kalinago and Arawak, also known as the Island Caribs and the Lakono. Their languages were part of the Arawakan and Caribbean language families. And while not much survives in terms of accent or speech, they left us some words like tobacco, iguana, and even hurricane. But the accent? That didn't stick. Mostly because colonization hit like a steel band in a library, loud and disruptive. Christopher Columbus spotted Trinidad in 1498, gave it the name La Isla de la Trinidad, and claimed it for Spain. But here's the thing, Spain barely lifted a finger after that. Trinidad was like that one house on the Monopoly board that's cheap, but useless. No hotels, no rent, no vibes. They were too busy cashing in on the real estate jackpot of the Caribbean. Cuba, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico. Meanwhile, Trinidad? Just a pit stop. Sure, Spain technically ruled the island for over 300 years, but it was more like a landlord who never shows up. The settlements were tiny, infrastructure was minimal, and most of the Spanish population stayed as long as it took to say conquistador and bounce. That's why Spanish barely made a dent in the Trini accent. Unlike in Cuba or the Dominican Republic, you won't hear much Castilian flavor in how Trinis talk today, apart from a few scattered words like savannah and cacao. But here comes the plot twist within the plot twist. Even though the Spanish still held the deed, by the 1700s, French settlers started arriving in waves, thanks to a move called the Cédula of Population, 1783. It was Spain's desperate attempt to get people to actually live in Trinidad. So they basically said, hey, French Catholics, come over, we'll pay you, bring your families, oh, and if you happen to have enslaved people, bring them too. And just like that, Trinidad became a kind of French colony in disguise. The French didn't own the place, but they were the ones throwing the parties, running the plantations, and filling the streets with French Creole or patois. This Creole wasn't just French vocabulary, it was a full linguistic remix. French structure, African rhythm, Caribbean context. That's why, even today in rural parts of Trinidad, especially among older folks, you'll still hear Trinidadian French patois. Not to be confused with Jamaican patois. That's a whole other language family with English roots. This patois was spoken in homes, sung in old lav ways, and woven into everyday life, long before English truly took over. So while the Spanish were on paper, it was the French and Africans who were on the ground, shaping the earliest flavors of Trini speech. Ever wondered why people say Mako or Fet? That's the French DNA showing up at the family reunion. Then in 1797, Britain shows up like, you know what? We'll take that. They took Trinidad from the Spanish, officially making English the main language. But by then the island already had a full Creole party going. The British may have brought the Queen's English, but the island, it remixed it. Let's not forget the biggest piece of the accent puzzle, West Africa. Through slavery. Tens of thousands of Africans were brought to Trinidad, mostly from the Akan, Yoruba, Igbo, and Congo peoples. They brought their languages, intonations, rhythms, and vibes. Ever notice how Trinis ask questions that don't sound like questions? Like you go in? That rising and falling tone? Straight out of West African speech patterns. Even our grammar breaks the Queen's rules in the most African way possible. He does eat fast. Translation, he eats really quickly. But that repetition, that's African emphasis. It slaps harder than it doubles with slight pepper. Fast forward to 1845. Slavery ends, and the British, not wanting to actually pay Africans fair wages, bring in indentured laborers from India. Over 140,000 came over the years, mainly from Bihar and Uttar Pradesh, and they brought Bhojpuri, Hindi, and Urdu with them. So now the pot thickens. Words like dugla, bacchanal, and even chutney start blending in. And in rural areas like Penal and Sangre Grande, you'll hear that slight Indian musicality in the accent. Some Trini still drop na at the end of a sentence like punctuation. You eating that na? Indian syntax, Caribbean style. Now here's a twist. Part of the Trini accent comes from Ireland. Yeah, potatoes, pints, and poetry Ireland. Back in the 1600s, the British were shipping Irish convicts and indentured servants to the Caribbean like they were Amazon packages. And when they weren't dropping dead from the heat, they were leaving behind their accent. Ever heard a Trini tell a story with that sing-song rhythm and punchline timing? That's not just vibes, that's Celtic seasoning. The Irish brought their musicality, their melodic speech, and their habit of breaking English rules in creative ways, all of which mixed in with African rhythms and British structure to help shape how Trinis talk today. So while they didn't come in massive numbers, the Irish accent still snuck into the stew. A little unexpected, but definitely flavorful. Just when you thought the stew was done, in comes the Chinese in the 1800s and Syrians and Lebanese in the early 1900s. Now, they didn't massively shift the accent like the Africans or Indians, but they sprinkled in more words, businesses, and influence. Also, can we talk about how every Syrian uncle in Trinidad somehow owns a furniture store or a mini-mart? It's practically tradition at this point. So what makes the Trini accent sound so? Trini, sing-song rhythm. Trini speak like they're halfway between telling a joke and singing a calypso. Melodic lilt. Our voices rise and fall like a tassa drum at a wedding. Slang and speed. We shorten everything. I going becomes I going. You understand becomes you feel me. And then we sprinkle in slang like lime to hang out. Best great. And Tabanka, lovesick misery, we had to name it. It hurts that much. Trinidad and Tobago became independent in 1962, and with that came the rise of local media. Calypso and soca exploded, so now the accent was being broadcast on airwaves, literally. We weren't just speaking Trini, we were singing it too. Kitchener, Sparrow, Marshall. They didn't just entertain, they preserved the vibe. In short, it came from everywhere. The Trini accent is what happens when Africa, India, France, Britain, the Caribbean, and vibes all move into the same house. It's not just an accent. It's a survival language, a comedy tool, a cultural badge. And yes, sometimes it even sounds like we making a joke when we dead serious. So, the next time you hear a Trini say, "Boy, the accent's sweet, eh?" Know that it's not just sweet. It's historic, global, and full of flavor. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Tell us which Trini word or phrase always cracks you up. And remember, the accent might sound playful, but behind it is a deep story of struggle, resistance, and rhythm. Thanks for watching.